The air in the docking bay was thick with the acrid tang of engine fumes and the low hum of alien chatter. Yerrick Voss adjusted the collar of his worn flight jacket, the fabric frayed at the edges but still sturdy enough to keep out the chill of deep space. He leaned against the hull of his ship, the Starblade, a patchwork freighter that had seen better days. Its once pristine silver plating was now a mosaic of dents and scorch marks, each one a testament to the countless runs through contested space lanes. Yerrick wasn't a hero, nor did he aspire to be. He was a trader, a scavenger, and, when the credits were good enough, a smuggler. Survival was his only creed, and in a galaxy where humans were little more than second-class citizens, survival was hard-won. The trading hub of Zorith 9 buzzed around him, a chaotic symphony of alien voices and clanking machinery. Tall, insectoid Krell merchants haggled with reptilian-born traders, while robotic servitors darted between stalls, their mechanical limbs laden with goods. Jarek's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the one face he needed to see. Grakthar, a Zorati merchant who owed him a small fortune. The debt had been piling up for months, and Yerrick was done waiting. He needed those credits, his ship needed repairs, his fuel reserves were running low, and the galaxy wasn't getting any kinder. Finally, he spotted Grakthar's hulking form near a stall selling exotic spices. The Zorati was a massive creature, his scaled skin a deep emerald green, with 4 arms that flexed as he gestured animatedly. Yerrick pushed off from his ship and strode over, his boots clanging against the metal floor. Grakthar turned as Yerrick approached, his slit-pupiled eyes narrowing in recognition. "Voss?" Grakthar rumbled, his voice like gravel grinding against stone. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Cut the pleasantries, Grak," Yerrick said, crossing his arms. "You owe me 5,000 credits, plus interest. I'm not leaving without it." Grakthar's lips curled into something resembling a smile, revealing rows of sharp, yellowed teeth. "Ah, but you see, my friend, I find myself in a bit of a liquidity crisis. Credits are tight these days." Jarek's jaw tightened. "I don't care about your liquidity crisis. You promised payment and I'm here to collect. No more excuses." The Zorati merchant leaned in, his breath reeking of something foul. "What if I could offer you something better than credits? Something unique?" Yerrick raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." Grakthar gestured to one of his lackeys, a smaller Zorati who scurried off and returned moments later, dragging a figure behind him. Jarek's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight. It was an alien, but unlike any he'd seen before. Slender and delicate, with skin that shimmered like opal under the harsh light of the docking bay, the creature looked almost ethereal. Its large, almond-shaped eyes were a deep violet, filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. She was clad in tattered robes that barely covered her fragile frame. "What is this?" Yerrick asked, his voice low. "A rare find," Grakthar said, his tone dripping with false pride. "A Lyrian. They're said to be the most intelligent species in the galaxy. And this one, well, let's just say she's special." Jarek's gaze flicked between Grakthar and the Lyrian. "You're offering me a slave as payment?" "Not just any slave," Grakthar said, his grin widening. "She's worth far more than the credits I owe you. Take her, sell her, keep her, it's your choice. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." Yerrick hesitated. He'd never dealt in slaves before. The idea left a bitter taste in his mouth, but he wasn't in a position to be picky. His ship was falling apart, and he needed resources. Still, something about the Lyrian's gaze made him uneasy. There was intelligence there, a spark of something more. "Fine," Yerrick said finally. "But if this blows up in my face, I'm coming back for you." Grakthar chuckled, a deep, guttural sound. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Yerrick took the Lyrian by the arm, his grip firm but not unkind. She flinched at his touch but didn't resist as he led her back to the Starblade. Once aboard, he released her and gestured to a corner of the cargo hold. "Stay there. Don't touch anything." She nodded silently, her violet eyes watching him intently. Yerrick ignored her and headed to the cockpit, firing up the engines. As the Starblade lifted off, He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a deal he'd come to regret. The first few hours of the journey passed in silence. Yarrick busied himself with routine checks, trying to ignore the presence of his new passenger. But eventually, curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed a ration bar and made his way to the cargo hold. The Lyrian was still in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked up as he approached, her expression unreadable. "Here," Yarrick said, tossing her the ration bar. "Eat." She caught it deftly and examined it with a critical eye before taking a small bite. Her movements were precise, almost regal, and Yarrick found himself wondering again who, or what, she really was. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then spoke in a soft, melodic voice. "Elora. Elora," Yarrick repeated. "I'm Yarrick. You're on my ship now. I don't know what Grakthar had planned for you, but I'm not in the business of keeping slaves. Once we reach the next port, I'll figure out what to do with you." Elora's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she didn't quite believe him. "And if I told you that port is the last place you should take me?" Yarrick frowned. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, the ship's proximity alarm blared. Yarrick cursed and rushed to the cockpit, Elora close behind. On the view screen, a sleek, black vessel was closing in fast, its weapons armed and ready. "Who the hell is that?" Yarrick muttered, his hands flying over the controls. "They're here for me," Elora said, her voice calm but urgent. "If they catch us, we're both dead." Yarrick shot her a glare. "Care to explain?" "Later," she said. "Right now, you need to get us out of here." Yarrick didn't have time to argue. He slammed the throttle forward, and the Starblade shot into hyperspace, leaving their pursuers behind for now. As the stars streaked past, he turned to Elora, his expression grim. "You've got a lot of explaining to do." She met his gaze, her violet eyes steady. "And you've just become the most wanted man in the galaxy." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Yarrick leaned back in his seat, running a hand through his hair. Whatever he'd gotten himself into, there was no turning back now. The game had changed, and he was playing for stakes he didn't yet understand. But one thing was clear. Elora was no ordinary slave, and this was no ordinary job. The Starblade hurtled through the void, carrying its unlikely passengers toward an uncertain future. Somewhere in the darkness, their enemies were closing in, and Yarrick knew that the next move he made could mean the difference between survival and oblivion. For now, all he could do was hold on and hope that luck, or something greater, was on his side. The Starblade shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, the sudden deceleration sending a jolt through the ship's aging frame. Yarrick gripped the controls, his knuckles white, as he scanned the stars cape ahead. They'd emerged in a remote sector, far from the bustling trade routes and prying eyes of the galactic authorities. The black vessel that had pursued them was nowhere to be seen, for now. But Yarrick knew better than to think they were safe. Whoever was after Elora had resources, and resources meant they'd be back. He turned to Elora, who stood silently beside him, her opalescent skin glowing faintly in the dim light of the cockpit. Her violet eyes were fixed on the view screen, her expression unreadable. Yarrick had 1,000 questions, but he started with the most pressing one. "Who are you really?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Elora hesitated, her gaze flicking to him before returning to the stars. "I told you my name." "That's not what I meant," Yarrick said, leaning back in his seat. "You're no ordinary slave. Those people back there, they weren't just bounty hunters. Who are you, and why are they willing to kill to get you?" She sighed, a soft, almost musical sound, and folded her arms across her chest. "If I tell you, you'll either turn me in or run as far as you can. Neither option helps me." Yarrick raised an eyebrow. "You don't trust me." "Should I?" she countered, her tone sharp but not unkind. "You bought me from Grakthar like I was a piece of cargo. Forgive me if I'm not eager to share my life story." Yarrick frowned, her words hitting closer to home than he cared to admit. He'd never considered himself a moral paragon, but the idea of treating another sentient being as property didn't sit well with him. Still, he wasn't about to let her deflect. "Look," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I didn't ask for this. Grakthar owed me and you were the payment. But if you're in trouble, real trouble, I need to know. Because right now, my ship and my life are on the line, and I'd like to know why." Elora studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. "Very well. But you're not going to like what you hear." She stepped closer, her movements graceful despite the tattered robes she wore. "I am Elora of House Lyrian, the ruling dynasty of the Lyrian hegemony. My family has governed our sector for generations, maintaining peace and stability. But not everyone is content with our rule. A faction within the hegemony, led by my uncle, staged a coup. They killed my parents and took me prisoner, intending to use me as a pawn to legitimize their rule. I escaped, but they've been hunting me ever since." Yarrick stared at her, his mind racing. A Galactic Heiress? This was far beyond anything he'd bargained for. "So you're telling me I've got the entire Lyrian hegemony on my tail because I happened to pick up their missing princess?" "Not just the hegemony," Elora said grimly. "My uncle has allies, powerful ones. Mercenaries, syndicates, even rival governments. If they find us, they'll kill you without a second thought and take me back to finish what they started." Yarrick ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "Fantastic. Just fantastic. And what exactly am I supposed to do with you? I'm a traitor, not a bodyguard." "You're all I have," Elora said, her voice steady but with a hint of desperation. "If you abandon me, I'm as good as dead. But if you help me, I can make it worth your while." Yarrick snorted. "Oh sure. What are you going to do? Promise me a palace and a title?" "I've heard that one before." "I can offer you something better," she said, stepping closer. "Leverage. My uncle's allies have secrets. Secrets that could destabilize entire systems. If we can expose them, we can turn the tide. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who knows how to navigate the shadows. Someone who isn't afraid to take risks. Someone like you." Yarrick met her gaze, searching for any sign of deceit. But all he saw was determination. She believed every word she was saying, and that made her even more dangerous. Still, he couldn't deny the spark of curiosity, and maybe even ambition, that her words ignited. "Let's say I believe you," he said slowly. "What's the plan?" Elora's lips curved into a faint smile. "First, we need to disappear. My uncle's forces will be scanning every port and outpost. We need to go somewhere they won't think to look." Elora spent most of her time in the cargo hold, poring over a datapad she'd salvaged from Grakthar's stash. Yarrick didn't ask what she was looking for. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. As they approached Kasari's orbit, the planet came into view. A barren, rocky world shrouded in perpetual twilight. The surface was dotted with sprawling cities, their neon lights flickering like fireflies in the gloom. Yarrick guided the ship toward one of the smaller settlements, a place called Black Hollow. It was the kind of town where no one asked questions, and where trouble could find you faster than you could blink. "You're new here," the Krell said, his voice a low buzz. "Newcomers pay a toll." Jarrick's grip tightened on his blaster, but before he could respond, Elora stepped forward. "We're not here to cause trouble," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "We're just passing through." The Krell tilted his head, studying her with interest. "And what's a pretty thing like you doing in a place like this?" Yarrick moved to intervene, but Elora held up a hand, stopping him. "We're looking for someone," she said. "A man named Vorian. Do you know him?" The Krell's antennae twitched, and he let out a low chuckle. "Vorian, eh? You've got guts, I'll give you that. He's not the kind of man you seek out unless you've got a death wish." The Krell hesitated, then shrugged. "Suit yourself. He's usually at the Rusted Star, a cantina on the east side of town. But don't say I didn't warn you." He stepped aside, and Yarrick and Elora continued on their way. As they walked, Yarrick shot her a sideways glance. "Vorian? Who's that? And why are we looking for him?" "An old friend," Elora said cryptically. "If anyone can help us, it's him." Yarrick didn't press further. but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far bigger and far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. The rusted star loomed ahead, its flickering sign casting an eerie glow over the street. Yarrick took a deep breath and pushed open the door, stepping into the dimly lit interior. The cantina was packed with aliens of every species, their voices rising in a cacophony of laughter and argument. Yarrick scanned the room, his eyes landing on a figure seated in the corner. The man was human, his face scarred and his eyes cold. He looked up as they approached, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well, Vorian said, his voice dripping with mockery. If it isn't Elora of House Lyrian. I was wondering when you'd show up. Jarrek's hand instinctively went to his blaster, but Elora placed a restraining hand on his arm. We need your help, she said, her voice steady. And before you say no, remember that you owe me. Vorian's smile faded, replaced by a look of grudging respect. You always did know how to play the game. Fine, let's talk. As they sat down, Yarrick couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes had just gotten higher. Whatever Elora was planning, it was clear that they were no longer just running, they were fighting back. And in a galaxy where the odds were stacked against them, that might be the only thing that could save them. The rusted star was a den of shadows and secrets, its air thick with the scent of stale ale and the low hum of whispered deals. Vorian leaned back in his seat, his scarred face illuminated by the flickering glow of a nearby hollow display. His cold eyes flicked between Yarrick and Elora, assessing them with the calculating gaze of a man who had survived more than his share of betrayals. You've got guts. I'll give you that, Vorian said, his voice a low rumble. Coming here, asking for my help. Most people know better. Elora met his gaze without flinching. We don't have a choice. My uncle's forces are closing in, and if they find us, it's over. You're the only one who can help us disappear. Vorian's lips curled into a smirk. Disappear, huh? That's your plan? Run and hide. For now, Elora said, her tone firm. But we're not just running. We're going to expose my uncle and his allies. We're going to take back what's mine. Yarrick shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He wasn't sure he liked where this was going. Vorian was dangerous, that much was obvious, and aligning themselves with him felt like stepping into a nest of vipers. But Elora seemed confident, and Yarrick had to admit that they were running out of options. Vorian leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. And what's in it for me? Name your price, Elora said without hesitation. Vorian's smirk widened. I like your style, princess, but this isn't about credits. If I help you, I'm putting a target on my back. Your uncle's allies don't take kindly to traitors. Then consider this an opportunity, Elora said, her voice dropping to a whisper. My uncle's allies have secrets that could bring down entire systems. If we can expose them, we can turn the tide. And you'll have a front row seat to the chaos. Vorian's eyes gleamed with interest. Now you're speaking my language. But let's be clear. If this goes south, I'm not going down with you. I'll cut my losses and disappear. Fair enough, Elora said, extending her hand. Do we have a deal? Vorian studied her for a moment, then clasped her hand in a firm grip. Deal. But don't say I didn't warn you. The next few days were a blur of planning and preparation. Vorian proved to be as resourceful as he was ruthless, securing safe passage off Kasari and arranging a rendezvous with a contact who could provide them with the information they needed. Yarrick found himself reluctantly impressed by the man's efficiency, though he couldn't shake the feeling that Vorian had his own agenda. Their destination was a remote asteroid base, hidden deep in the outer rim. The journey was tense, the Starblade's engines straining under the strain of constant evasive maneuvers. Elora spent most of her time in the cargo hold, poring over data and schematics, while Yarrick kept a wary eye on Vorian. The man was an enigma, his motives as murky as the shadows he seemed to thrive in. When they finally reached the asteroid base, it was a stark contrast to the chaos of Kasari. The base was a sprawling complex of tunnels and chambers, its walls lined with flickering lights and humming machinery. Vorian led them through the maze-like corridors, his movements confident and assured, Their contact was waiting for them in a dimly lit chamber, a wiry alien with sharp features and a nervous energy. He introduced himself as Zyn, a data broker with a reputation for being able to find anything, for the right price. "You're looking for dirt on the Lyrian hegemony," Zyn said, his voice a high-pitched rasp, "specifically on Ellora's uncle and his allies. That's not going to be easy." "We're not asking for easy," Ellora said, her tone sharp. "We're asking for results." Zyn's eyes flicked to Vorian, who gave a subtle nod. "Very well, but this is going to cost you." "Name your price," Ellora said, her voice steady. Zyn's lips curled into a sly smile. "I don't deal in credits. I deal in favors, and I have a feeling you'll be in a position to grant me one in the near future." Ellora hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed." Zyn's smile widened, and he turned to a console, his fingers flying over the keys. "Give me a moment. I'll see what I can dig up." As Zyn worked, Yerrick leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Every step they took seemed to draw them deeper into a web of intrigue and danger, and he wasn't sure they'd be able to find their way out. Finally, Zyn straightened, his expression grim. "I found something, but you're not going to like it." Ellora stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Zyn gestured to the console, and a holographic image flickered to life. It was a recording, grainy and distorted, but the figures were unmistakable. Ellora's uncle stood at the center, surrounded by a group of shadowy figures. Their voices were low and urgent, their words sending a chill down Jarek's spine. "They're planning an attack," Zyn said, his voice barely above a whisper. "On the Lyrian capital. They're going to frame it as an act of terrorism, then use it to justify a crackdown on dissent. If they succeed, your uncle's rule will be absolute." Ellora's fists clenched, her expression a mixture of anger and determination. "We have to stop them." "It's not that simple," Zyn said, his tone grim. "They've got allies in high places. If you try to expose them, they'll bury you." "Then we'll have to be smarter," Ellora said, her voice steady. "We'll hit them where it hurts." Yerrick stepped forward, his mind racing. "We need a plan, a way to expose them without getting ourselves killed." Vorian smirked. "Sounds like my kind of job." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Ellora, Yerrick, and Vorian worked together, their combined skills and knowledge forming the backbone of a daring plan. They would infiltrate the Lyrian capital, using the information Zyn had provided to expose Ellora's uncle and his allies. It was a risky move, but it was their only chance. As they prepared to leave the asteroid base, Yerrick found himself alone with Ellora for the first time in days. She was standing by the Starblade S-ramp, her gaze fixed on the stars. "You're sure about this?" Yerrick asked, his voice low. Ellora turned to him, her violet eyes filled with determination. "I have to be. This is my fight, Yerrick. My family, my people. They're counting on me." Yerrick nodded, a grudging respect forming in his chest. She was brave, he had to give her that. And maybe, just maybe, she was right. Maybe they could make a difference. "Then let's finish this," he said, extending his hand. Ellora clasped it, her grip firm. Together. As the Starblade lifted off, Yerrick couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into the heart of the storm. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a spark of hope. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched, but they had something their enemies didn't. They had each other. And in a galaxy where survival was the only rule, that might just be enough.